A movie night with my stepson that crossed the line. True Infidelity Story. I never imagined that such an ordinary night could change everything. It was a Friday like any other, and I accepted the invitation from Carlos, my partner's son, to watch a movie. It was not something out of the ordinary. We had shared several afternoons of cinema together since his father and I started dating, but that night something felt different. Perhaps it was the choice of a movie that neither of us seemed really interested in watching, or perhaps it was the first time I noticed his presence in a way that I could not ignore. Carlos was 24 years old. He was an athlete, with a contagious energy and a smile that seemed to illuminate the room. I, at 46, had always felt comfortable with myself and enjoyed the company and interesting conversations, but I never expected his attention to be so intense. We sat in the last row of the cinema, where the darkness was more palpable and the distance with the rest of the audience gave us a feeling of intimacy. First, everything was normal, little doves, soft laughs for some of his comments in the ear. But as the movie progressed, I noticed how his arm touched mine more often than necessary. I thought it was my imagination, but when his hand approached mine, I knew it was no coincidence. I stood still, my heart beating fast. I could have moved away, I could have said something, but I didn't. Instead, my breathing accelerated and I felt an unexpected warmth run through my body. His hand remained close, a light contact that left me breathless. The darkness of the cinema was our ally, and the tension between us became almost palpable. I just closed my eyes. It was crazy, I knew it, but the feeling of his closeness, the curiosity of what could happen, made it impossible for me to break the moment. My body responded before my mind could process it. I bit my lip not to express my nervousness while I felt his presence. The movie went on, but I didn't hear anything anymore. I dared to open my eyes and I saw him looking at me with a mixture of curiosity and satisfaction. No one else in the room seemed to notice what was happening in that dark corner. But for us, the world had ceased to exist. When the movie ended, we sat in silence while the credits rolled. Neither of us said a word on the way home, but the tension was almost unbearable. I knew something had changed. The question now was what would happen from that moment on. A week later, Carlos sent me a message with a new movie invitation. This time, the movie he had chosen was a drama with complex characters and intense situations. My heart beat faster just by reading the title. I knew what that meant, and so did he. Even so, I accepted it without thinking too much. We meet in the cinema again. We choose the last row. The room was almost empty, which increased the tension between us. From the first moment, I felt his gaze on me. The movie began and the screen was filled with scenes full of emotion. Every whisper, every gesture on the screen seemed to reflect what we both felt. Carlos did not take long to approach. His hand found mine first, his fingers interlacing with mine before slipping through my arm, leaving a trail of fire in his path. When his hand reached my waist, I approached him involuntarily. His breath in my ear made me shudder. "I can't stop thinking about you," he whispered, his voice hoarse and full of something I couldn't decipher. I didn't respond with words. My actions spoke for me. I turned slightly and looked for his lips. The first kiss was soft, exploratory, but soon it became more urgent. I felt his hand on my back, getting even closer. While the movie showed characters facing their emotions, we created our own version in the dark. His hands moved carefully, causing a feeling that I could barely contain. We moved to the rhythm of the movie, our bodies synchronized in a silent dance. The feeling of being observed, although no one seemed to notice what we were doing, only increased the awareness of the situation. When the lights in the rooms turned on at the end of the movie, our breaths were interrupted and our bodies still trembled slightly. We looked at each other, knowing that what we had shared was not just a movie date. The following days were a mixture of anxiety and expectation. Every look that Carlos and I shared at home was full of a tension that only we understood. We couldn't ignore what had happened, so when he proposed another date, I didn't hesitate to accept. I knew that this time there would be no turning back. We arrived at the cinema as if we were two ordinary people, but as soon as we entered the darkness of the room, the facade crumbled. The movie was irrelevant. The real show was between us. We sat in the same last row, the heart beating at 1,000 per hour, knowing that we were about to cross the last border. From the first moment Carlos approached, his lips met mine with an urgency that left me breathless. His tongue explored curiously as his hands touched my body. There was no room for doubt or guilt. There was only the moment and the need to feel close. His hands slipped on my back. I felt how his breathing accelerated, how his fingers traced paths on my skin. I couldn't help but sigh when his mouth found my neck, kissing me with a mixture of tenderness and intensity. I settled close to him, feeling his body against mine. We moved to the rhythm of the music of the movie, our bodies merging in a silent dance. Each of his movements made me lose track of where we were. The intensity grew with each encounter, as if our souls were connecting in a game we didn't want to escape from. When the movie ended and the lights went on, we looked at each other in silence. We didn't need words to understand what we had done and what it meant. We knew we had explored something that attracted us. We left the cinema holding hands, knowing that the darkness of the room had witnessed something more than a simple exit. It was the beginning of something deeper, more complicated. And neither of us was willing to stop it. Since that last exit to the cinema, something between us had changed definitively. It wasn't just the electricity of the stealthy looks or the touches that seemed casual. It was the certainty that we had shared something important. The days went by with a mixture of normality and expectation. At home we maintained appearances, exchanging smiles that said much more than anyone could suspect. Every time we coincided in the hallway, I felt his gaze. One night while I was making coffee in the kitchen, I felt his presence before I said a single word. He came up to me with the calm of someone who knows exactly what he wants. "Do you sleep early today?" Drania asked in a low voice. My hand shook slightly on the cup. It wasn't an innocent question. I knew it. I looked at him with bewilderment, and I found myself with those dark eyes that seemed to challenge me. "It depends," I replied, pretending indifference. "Maybe we can watch another movie at home." The silence between us grew longer, full of meaning. My breathing became slower, more conscious. The idea was intriguing, but the mere possibility made me shudder. I sat down without saying a word. That night, when everyone was sleeping at home, I found myself again in his company. There was no giant screen or movie seats, but the atmosphere between us was the same, dense, enveloping, inevitable. He turned on the TV and let the movie progress, but neither of them paid attention to the screen. His closeness was a silent storm that threatened to break loose at any moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was just a whisper. "Do you know that this is not just a game?" I didn't answer right away. I knew it from the first moment, but admitting it out loud was different. "I know," I muttered. The truth hung between us, as fragile and dangerous as the desire that enveloped us. And in that instant, I understood that there was no turning back. The movie continued to advance on the screen, but our minds were elsewhere. The faint light of the TV cast shadows over his face, accentuating the intensity of his gaze. There was no need for words. The silence between us spoke for itself. I felt his hand touch mine. A light contact, but full of intention. My skin itched instantly. "Don't leave me." I couldn't. "We shouldn't," I whispered, but my voice lacked firmness. He tilted his head barely a little, without taking his eyes away from mine. "Then tell me to stop." I didn't. The air between us became heavier, as if space itself conspired to bring us closer. A heartbeat, too, until finally the abyss that separated us disappeared. His hand slowly rose over my arm, leaving a trace of fire at his feet. My breathing became heavier. There was no adrenaline like in the movies. There was no fear of being discovered. Only the intensity of what was about to happen. "It's not just desire, is it?" Drania asked with a tone that mixed certainty and vulnerability. I denied with my head, unable to utter a word. "No, it wasn't." His hand rose to my face, his fingers tracing the line of my jaw with an unexpected softness. His breath rubbed my lips, but it didn't cross the last border. I was waiting for a signal. My heart was beating hard in my chest, trapped between doubt and certainty that everything would change if I took one more step, but we had already crossed too many limits. I closed my eyes and let myself go. When our mouths finally met, there was no hurry, just a paused exploration, almost irreverent. His hand slipped to my waist. The film continued in the background, ignored, while we got lost in a game that we couldn't get out of anymore. The kiss wasn't hasty or clumsy. It was slow, deliberate, as if we were exploring a terrain that we had both forbidden, but inevitable. My fingers clung to the fabric of his shirt, trying to find something to hold me while the world around us was blurring. When we were just a few millimeters apart, our breaths intertwined in the darkness of the room. My chest rose and fell rapidly, and his dark gaze burned with an intensity that made me shudder. "Tell him to stop me," he repeated, his voice deeper, lower. But the words didn't come out, because stopping him would be denying what we both knew existed between us. I remained silent, and in that absence of an answer, everything was decided. I felt his fingers run through my back, a touch as subtle as electrifying. There was no urgency, no hurry, just a silent game in which every touch was a question, and every sigh an answer. The film came to an end on the screen, but we were still trapped in our own story. Outside, the world was still spinning, unaware of what was happening in the darkness of that room. There were no words when we finally moved away, when we looked each other in the eye with the certainty that we had crossed a threshold from which there was no return. I got up first, feeling his gaze run through me as I walked towards the door. I stopped for just a moment before disappearing down the corridor. "Good night, Carlos," I whispered without turning around, but we both knew this wouldn't end there.